Hi, everyone. Okay, thank you all for joining us, the panelists, and obviously all of you. We took a bit of a break, about 3 months. And during that time, we were really able to think through what we want these virtual events to be about. Because of COVID, all the in-person events are done and everyone's doing virtual events. When we started doing these, having a panel break down a topic was super progressive because a lot of people were mainly using these to sell something. Now everyone's doing it. And so we spent some time talking to people to understand what they want these webinars to be about. And what we learned is that you, the audience, want to have a bigger voice. You want to be involved in the conversation. And so we're going to continuously try new and interesting ways to make that happen. For this one, we asked people what they wanted us to talk about. We asked people to send us questions. We used those to pick the topic and put together some questions. And obviously, we'll be actively looking at the Q&A box, but we'll also try something different, similar to what we did last time, running a thought exchange and really bringing you guys into the conversation. So this is us saying we hear you, and hopefully we continue getting better at this every single time. Now, in terms of the topic today, we'll be tackling how go-to-market professionals can win over the next 18 to 24 months. In our last webinar, Liz Kane from OpenView Ventures had said that to really know where you stand as a business, stop worrying about external data and focus on your internal KPIs. It seems like everybody's looking at their KPIs and seeing some positive trends. Fantastic. But the next 18 to 24 months will have some challenges, mainly because the market will have conservative spending habits as the norm. And so to break this topic down, we have three, in the words of Christopher Lockheed, legendary revenue leaders here. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into it. Kyle, let's start with you. Can you tell people a little bit about your background, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, my apologies first off, because there's definitely a lawnmower in the background. So COVID, pretty much COVID every day. So I serve the marketing team at Lessonly. So I lead basically brand demand and actually all the outbound sales team, BDRs and SDRs at Lessonly. We are coaching and enablement software for sales and customer service teams.
Fantastic. Thanks for doing this. I'm sure you get 37 requests a week. And so
I love it. Great.
I love it. Roderick, I have gotten to know you over the last couple of months. I leave every conversation a little bit smarter. So thank you for doing this. Can you tell people a bit about your background as well?
First of all, thank you very much for the compliment. I appreciate it. I feel the very same way after each of our conversations as well.
Don't make me blush.
I'm blushing, you just can't tell. So I'm Roderick Jefferson. I'm the CEO of Roderick Jefferson and Associates. And if you can't tell, we've got to have some fun with this thing too. We are a sales enablement and sales coaching consulting agency. I come from a sales background, started as a BDR. I was an AE, and I have run sales enablement at Siebel Systems, Network Appliance, eBay, HP, Oracle, Salesforce, and most recently Marketo, before striking out on my own and kicking off this consulting gig. So what I'm looking to do today is kind of balance out the sales thing and talk to the sales trainers and the sales enablement practitioners as well on what we can and what we need to do differently.
Love it. Thank you for doing this. And then my man, Jayme Smithers.
Hey.
Tell everyone about yourself.
So it's a pleasure, Asad, to be here. Jayme Smithers. I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Thoughtexchange, a crowdsourcing platform helping. Our mission is to bring people together with technology to scale conversations. It's been a pretty interesting time for us at this moment, as our usage has gone up 600% as organizations are looking for meaningful ways to build trust in this moment and connect meaningfully their staff, as everybody is all remote, and solve really contentious, tough topics. A little bit about me. I'm almost 20 years now in technology. Some of the brands that Roderick just mentioned, I started at Crystal, Business Objects, SAP, had a couple of really successful exits there and transitions. And then I was at NetSuite, Oracle, and then moved over to Thoughtexchange. So 20 years. I believe in creating an environment that allows people to be their absolute best is my mission as a leader. That's what I try to strive for in all of the companies that I've worked for, is how do I put an environment that allows people to achieve their absolute best, and or now as our clients as well to achieve their absolute best. I live in Rossland, BC, a small little town in BC, in Vancouver, or outside of Vancouver. We've got moose, elk, deer. I've got 2 kids, a dog, And when I'm not working at Thoughtexchange, I'm trying to run an ultra or ski fast down a hill or race down a mountain bike trail and or just play and camp with my family.
Wow.
A bit about
Wow.
me.
You win.
I was
I'm in
complaining to
There's
Jayme
nothing
about
like that.
how I'm locked into like a small apartment in COVID. And he's like, I have no idea what you mean. And he showed me his garden and there's like a mountain and a deer and like this snowmobile. It was wild. Okay, let's jump into this. Kyle, you are the chapter head for the Revenue Collective. I'm a huge fan and partner. You guys put out this economic benchmark survey through the earlier part of COVID that was super insightful. And in the May publication, it showed that companies had started prioritizing customer success. I think 53% of respondents said that they reallocated staff into CS and 32% actually had to go out and hire for CS. CS has traditionally been this understaffed, underappreciated division in a lot of companies. And now they're getting the recognition they deserve. The Bridge Group released some data recently where they said that for 2020, the net revenue retention rate is projected to be 97% on average, whereas companies are aiming for that 130% or more mark. A major challenge for CS folks right now is that renewals that used to happen at the team level are now happening more holistically and the decision-making criteria has changed. So how can leaders, specifically marketing leaders, support CS with this new challenge?
Well, I think what's interesting is that we're seeing, I think the renaissance of CS has been happening over the past couple of years and more emphasis. I don't know why, because it seems it seems like a no-brainer to me that a lot of the emphasis is being put on expansion revenue and net dollar retention, right? As software companies, which we should be anyway, right? We want to be at 120, 130%. So for marketers, the transition that we made through COVID, and we were starting to do that last year, was we're calling it full funnel, full cycle marketing, full cycle revenue, which is basically, we have always been taught and to look at top of the funnel. That's what we're good at, creating demand, the brand, and we spend less time thinking about what happens after they sign the contract. And so for marketers, it is, number one, source real revenue, and don't give me any of this crap on we influence pipeline or anything like that. Direct source revenue, and then direct source expansion revenue. And the only way that you can do that is focus on the entire life cycle of the customer and the customer experience, which marketers are really good at, in my opinion. So the way that marketers can influence it and can influence customer success is take the experience that you have from a brand perspective and from a messaging perspective and from an experience perspective and build it into the CS strategy after the contract's signed. And that's where the full revenue, the full cycle marketer is coming into effect, in my opinion.
Fascinating. Very, very interesting. Roderick, just to kind of take a different angle to this. So traditionally, sales reps have been trained to sell in a way where buyers are considering spending on solving a particular problem. And a lot of the training salespeople get is around how to position your solution as the better solution from a bunch of options. Now it seems, and this was again put out by the Bridge Group, so I owe them a lot for this. I've drawn tons of value from them recently. They were talking about how now we are selling against status quo, which is something that sellers have not been trained on a lot. So can you talk a little bit about how companies can quickly equip sellers to sell effectively against status quo?
Yeah, I think it starts with the discovery and qualification process. To your point, it's always been about how do we message and position what we're doing. And that turns into a presentation or a demo. What shifted is, I think it's a time where I'm seeing more companies that are enabling their sellers to have more conversations and stop giving those presentations. And that means focusing on business outcomes now, and no longer talking about the features, the benefits, the bits, bytes, and bots. I think another shift now that we're talking about the status quo is the conversation around ROI doesn't have nearly the impact that it used to have. So now that you're fighting against status quo, the bigger conversation is around COI. What's the cost of inaction, of sitting still and doing right now? What will that do to your company? Will it push you further behind in the competitive landscape? Will it slow down innovation? Will it allow your competitors to come past where you are? Or will it stagnate the revenue stream that's coming in? So now we're enabling sellers to say, what's happening today? And talk about the why, not what needs to change. And sometimes it's always about the pain. How do I do one of two things? How do we help you either increase productivity and efficiency or decrease pain? And sometimes it's aspirin, sometimes it's Vicodin, sometimes it's amputation. And you just have to kind of stop what you're doing. And especially in that last one, if it's an amputation situation, that's really delicate. And I think that's where having the ability to talk from the perspective of compassion and humanity and empathy and EQ right now is more important sometimes than actual sales skills. It's about how you approach the conversation, and it's about focusing again on that why, not just what has to change or what your product or solution brings. Talk about the experience.
One of the challenges of this is that when we went from this perpetual revenue model to the recurring revenue model, the average age of sales teams went down. It's about 25 to like 40 right now. So how do you get somebody who's like 5 years in, talking to a COO who's like 45, 50 years old with tons more experience? How do you help them actually be able to take this approach and do it effectively, actually have a conversation? What are the training fundamentals required?
Sure, that's where the collaboration piece of enablement comes in. I'm now working with product marketing. I'm now working with marketing. I'm now working with product management on how do we position this differently? How do we now also bring this down to a set of simple common definitions around our ICP? Because just being able to talk to an ideal client profile or customer profile, to your point, doesn't work anymore. If I'm 25, I don't even really know what that means. So now we're taking this and we're putting the enablement programs and the rollouts and deployments differently. Now it's about knowledge bites. Don't give them a 30-minute talking head anymore. Give them 5-6 minute podcasts that focus on key differentiation, competitive advantage, and business value. Now, let me explain those really quickly. We're very good as sellers and enablement folks of talking about key differentiation and competitive advantage. Newsflash, prospect or customer only cares about the last. So what we're doing now is saying, focus on this. How do you help them increase productivity or decrease pain, regardless of what they're selling? If you stay in that box and you give it to them in the learning path of small, what we call knowledge bites, it's easier for them to imbibe and also easier for them to then take and internalize and then start messaging it. And you've got to give them some real life examples. You can't give them big picture because there's not enough experience yet to draw on big picture and background. So you say, here are some very defined things, stay within this box. And then it's incumbent upon working with the first line managers on making sure that they're not only adopting and executing on the enablement, but modeling it as well. Because what's important to your manager is imperative to you.
We might actually see decks go away, like that sales deck.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, right? Because it's not a conversation when you're like, let me take you through my slide deck. Jayme, a challenge everyone's having right now is working with finance. Now, finance on the non-transactional deals has always been involved, but it seems like they are involved in a different way right now. And that's creating a challenge for both sales and customer success. Finance leaders are super conservative about the money that they're spending. And so what type of support or ideas do you have for sales and CS folks that are trying to figure out how to work effectively and sell effectively to finance?
Great question. Roderick opened the door already for me, and actually same with Kyle. So you got to think about the entire value chain of what you're bringing together and why you exist first and foremost. What's the purpose of your organization? What's the purpose of your platform and what you're actually doing? I recently did this panel with Lisa McLeod. She's the author, 5-time seller author of Selling with Noble Purpose and Leading with Noble Purpose. And she talks about her the highest, most productive leaders and sellers are those that get it, that understand the why. If I'm selling a drug, I know that the drug is influencing the little old lady that then can go see her family because she's taking that drug, and they have purpose and they have the story around that. So first and foremost, I would say, understand your own personal why, your organization's why, and the purpose of why you exist to do what you do for organizations. And that's that customer centricity. And Roderick is alluding to it. And then even before that, though, I think the most important thing as leaders, again, back to what my opening statement was, my job is to create an environment where people can achieve their best. That's why you invest with Kyle's organization. That's why you invest with Roderick. What are we as leaders doing to help the staff that are at the front lines that have the hardest job? If we're not helping them first get into a state where, with productive tools, with leaning into mental health, with giving them the opportunity to shine, then it's all for naught. That's our job as leaders, to step up and first address the elephant in the room of what we can do to help you as a seller. And I would highly encourage you to lean in and or work for an organization that's like Kyle or Roderick, that's leaning in to figure out how we can help you as sellers be the best versions of yourself. I think that's the most important thing. When you look after your people, give them then the tools, they will do everything for you and achieve all. And then secondarily, the some of the additional points that Roderick had hit on, which is the EQ, the language, those are all things that are super important. Meaning you have to be aware that your buyer is going through the same challenges. I don't know, maybe their parents are sick. Maybe they're working through things. Having empathy and having the emotional intelligence of where your buyer is at, you know, in Maslow's hierarchy needs. Maybe they're fully in survival brain and challenged right now. Having empathy and leaning in and giving space and being intentional. So, and that's one. And number two is aligning and understanding your product. I have a great mentor that said, if you want to sell to finance, speak finance. Understand that they speak in Excel. If you don't understand Excel and the business makeup of their business, you're not going to sell and get finance on board. And then lastly, the greatest sellers that I've seen over my years always press the easy button. They go above and beyond to make it so easy for the buyer to buy. They build up the business case for them. They don't let the prospect do that for them. They do it. Let me help you do that. They figure out and navigate who's who in the organization and the complex seller to figure in the complex sale to figure that out. They're pressing the easy button because it is way harder. And the natural first set of defenses, it's COVID, we don't have money, we can't spend. But the reality is the best sellers, the best organizations are doing well at this time because they have technology and purpose to make digital transformation, to scale conversations, to do the types of things. So
interesting. We don't talk about that a bit more, but I think there are a couple of comments here and we have now gotten our feet wet. So let's actually bring the audience into the mix. Jayme, are you going to run the Thoughtexchange fast? Because I don't want to screw it up.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, so thanks. Let's, as promised, let's get into it here.
And then Kyle, I want to hear a bit more about these events you're doing.
Let me, while you're looking for that, let me just add on one point to the younger sales reps, and I'm going to get really tactical really fast. But what we have done is we have brought in the prospects to talk to our sales teams. So they will interview a prospect or a customer that's a persona that we want to sell. We then build training around those personas and do practice and coaching and enablement around the conversations and the interviews that they had with that prospect. So if we want to sell a call center leader, we're going to bring a call center leader in. We're not bringing them into the office anymore. We'll do it virtually so that they can ask questions, because those are the people we're trying to sell. So I just wanted to put that note on it because it's been really helpful for us as an organization.
Love it.
Okay, so we're going to take 4 minutes to connect with everybody there. There's some comments in chat. Here's the big promise that Asad set out at the start, which is, what do you think are the biggest challenges in go-to-market profession that you have or will face in the next 18 to 24 months? So in the promise, as Asad set out, which is, this is more about than 3 people up here talking about what we think is most important. We're giving you some sound bites on what that is. But what's more powerful is actually making a connection to that information of what you need, what's most important for you at this particular time. So here's the participation portion. If you were thinking you were going to a regular webinar where you're just going to sit and get, we know that the best presentations are those where you're interactive and connecting with the content and with the speakers. So pull out your phone, 3 quick, simple steps. We're going to take 4 minutes and we'll explore your data, your thoughts right now. Pull out your phone, put it over the QR code or go into chat There's a link that is just posted there. Click on the link, and then you get 3 simple, powerful steps. Just accept the privacy information and share your first thought. What do you think are your biggest challenges that you will face in the next 18 to 24 months? What are your biggest challenges here? Write what the thought is and why that's important. And then once you've done 1 or 2 thoughts, go into the rating portion, rate 10, 20, 30 thoughts. There's a good group of people here. Try to rate as many as possible, and then we'll explore together. So ready, set, go.
There we go.
If you're an introvert, then you're finally happy to actually think into this content and process some of the things that Roderick, Asad, or myself have said. There we go. We already got 19 participants in. It's great. So share 1 or 2 thoughts. If you're struggling, go right to the rating and see what other people are sharing, and then go back and share a couple of thoughts. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, is a challenge. Or just, rate 1 or 2 thoughts, and then let's try to rate as many as we possibly can.
Okay.
It's great. We got 28 people in now.
All in.
Jayme, absolutely love the integration of this interactivity. There's nothing like getting direct feedback.
Fun, right?
Absolutely, because we've all sat on enough of these.
If everyone's in, I'm going to start going in and exploring this here and see the conversation happening real time here.
So you should. Can I get this for?
Yeah.
For our webinars.
So I'm super reluctant to ever do like anything that is like a promotion of one of us, but this just makes the webinar that much better. And so I used it once and I was like, fuck, this is it. We only.
This is officially the best webinar I've ever been on already.
What's up? Let's do this.
Well, because it's not just us doing the talking head.
Right?
I love the fact that we're getting real-time feedback and they're actually getting the questions answered and being able to share peer-to-peer. This is amazing.
There we go.
Okay, so we got 1 minute left, final countdown. If you haven't already, finish up your last thought that you're sharing, and encourage you just to jump over and rate, get excited about rating 10, 20. There's 20 thoughts, try to rate them all. We got 50 seconds. And then we'll turn it over to Asad and we'll just explore real time what's top of mind with everybody on the group.
So while everyone finishes that, Kyle, can you tell us a little bit about these wine tastings and whiskey sessions and whatnot? What's going on there? It seems.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. We were doing 20 to 25 field events a quarter. So basically every account executive had a field event in their territory. And when we all went remote in March because of COVID, the pandemic, we tried to figure out the best way to have a Zoom call that people would show up to, because everybody was starting to burn out pretty quickly in those first couple months, right? We all experienced it. So we did wine tasting, whiskey tasting, cooking classes. We did all of the mailing. So people would give us their address. Of course, this is North America. We couldn't send anything internationally, but and we have 90% participation. 90% of the people, they range between 20 and 30 people per event, and it's basically half customers, half prospects.
That's why.
And all we do is talk about whiskey, they taste it, and then they talk about whatever the hell they want to talk about, and it works really, really, really well.
So you guys have had this thing where you had a board game as well. I remember looking at that, like I think I saw it for the first time like a year ago, and it was like mind-blowing. What's the process of coming up with these ideas? Like, who gets together? What's the session like? How do these ideas come together?
It's a brainstorming session between the marketing team, and then we pick the coolest idea and go do it.
It's fun. I love it. Okay, let's do this. Let's jump into the thought exchange. So we don't go through these and pick a couple to break down a bit. So the changing buyer landscape due to COVID, pandemic, and work from home. Companies don't even know where the future state will be, so it's difficult for sellers to anticipate and navigate. Yeah, I think this is something that everyone's dealing with, which is there's just so much unknown. So it's taken away the predictability from a sales process, from a renewal process, all of that. So what advice do you have for somebody that's struggling with this? Roderick, you go.
Well, from an enablement perspective, I want to talk to the leaders first and foremost. and it's something that Jayme just said. Remember, these are humans at home. They're going through difficult times too, right? So when you're talking to these folks, give them just a little bit of a break, because we're all dealing with something. From an enablement perspective, it meant shifting the way that we enabled completely. We're not pulling people together anymore. We're not putting them in a room. We're not running them through boot camps. So it's about finding new ways to create these virtual cohorts. And I've seen a couple of these done really, really well, where you'll have the content piece, which would have been your standard boot camp. But then there's also some breaks in there for things like, self-help and meditation. There's breaks in there where you're not going that full 8 hours straight. You give them the morning, you give them a break, you may come back in the afternoon. You've got to do things differently now, and you can't expect folks to absorb the kind of information that they absorbed before. And working from home, stagger the times that you're starting. Maybe you don't start at the traditional 8 a.m. in the morning, right? You've got that day to work with. And if you're breaking it into chunks, it makes it a lot easier to be a bit more flexible. You can still get the same information across. What does become more important now is the virtual pre-work, because that now creates a baseline of information that you would have had in that traditional boot camp. And so now you do that, you put assessments around it, and you also put some kind of stand and deliver accreditation for validation of being able to message and position that piece. And I think we move forward. Now, in the buyer's landscape change is craziness. What I'm seeing a big shift is, before, companies would talk about their sales process, their sales stages, their sales methodologies. Now I'm seeing more of it lift up and talk about the actual buyer's journey and what's happening, why they buy, instead of trying to shoehorn buyers into their sales process and methodology. That also means that you've got to step back, and if you have not reassessed your ICP, go do it right now, because of who you were looking at before may be very different. With sellers, the focus has to go from how do we help them, accelerate time to revenue, decrease blah, 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 to really how do we help our customers maintain the customers that they have today? How do we help them mitigate risk? How do we help them cut costs?
So risk
it's a whole different approach.
Really cool. Interesting. The other one, I deal with the uncertainty and fear of the markets to new investments and new projects. Kyle, what are you guys doing for this across the entire spectrum? So to create pipeline, to impact renewals and get deals done, what are some of the interesting things you are doing on your end, or you've seen some of the Revenue Collective members do with this challenge?
Well, I think that the main thing that we did was just get on the phone and talk to our customers. I think what's fascinating is that we tend to become very siloed when there's uncertainty, and we draw within and we try to figure out what should we do as a company, and your customers are dealing with it too. Talk to them, get on the phone. What are they thinking about their sales kickoff? What are they thinking when it needs to go virtual? Everything Roderick said is correct. You need to be looking at your ICP. We looked at our product roadmap. What features do we need to produce, like a Zoom integration as an example? What do we need to do to help in this new remote world? We're lucky that we're training software. So once you get Zoom, then you need to figure out what to do with all the in-person training you were doing before. And that's where Leslie comes in, right? And you start doing more of the bite-sized stuff, which you guys have talked about already. But for us, it was hitting our customer advisory board. It was talking to everybody that we possibly could to better understand where their heads were at. And then you got your current state. Then the exec team had to think about, what do we think the future state is going to be? And then we make the decision, because I think part of it's what your customers are saying, but the other part of it is you have to be innovative in terms of what you think the future state of all this is going to be.
I really like that, because I think the most annoying email in the world starts with, I hope you're safe and healthy and your family is this and all of that.
Yeah, right? I hope you think that too. I don't know why you would think the opposite of that.
It feels disingenuous.
Wish them harm for the last 7 years. And that's so annoying. Having these conversations allows you to actually figure out how to go and talk to your customer. I really like that. Talk to your existing customers to learn how to talk to your new prospects.
There's just one more on this, Asad, too, which is, these are great comments, which is, I don't know, just look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Take care of yourself and your team. What are the current challenges that you're facing? What are your staff facing? Have that conversation. What are the biggest challenges that you're faced as an SDR, as an AE, as a BDR, as an AM? And actually look outside greater. Actually, oftentimes we just look at ourselves, but it's like to Kyle's point, you know, when the conversation around social injustice and around George Floyd happened, our CEO put a press release out just like many others. And we're like, we were thinking about ourselves, but actually what he did one step further, which is like, what do you need, client? What can I help you with in our organization? It was that customer centricity. What should we do as an organization to help our customers add more value during this particular time? And so it's like, never forget like the customer and your business and where that actually comes from. I love Kyle's point there, which is like, look after yourself, have the conversation. One of the things we did was said, we would like to get to breakthrough performance. We're going to get on a mission to get through breakthrough performance as our team. So what is the current things that are preventing us? And then what are the things that we could do? And then you just iterate on that. So then we're like, oh, we need to prepare more. We need to have customer centric first. We need to embrace learning. Learning is at the core right now of what we should be doing as an organization because it's changing so quickly. So if we embrace a learning mindset and a coaching mindset in our organization, we won't get stuck into this is our sales process that we've always used. So this is how we should go about this, the market. It's like, I don't know, it just changed. Like March is different than May. September is different than May even. So,
well, I mean, our most successful marketing deliverable in the first half of the year was a coloring book.
I saw that.
That's it. We said, all right, what do people need right now? And it's that kids are everywhere. Nobody has any idea what to do with their children. And so we just started creating word search. You got to find the llama and picture because that's what they needed. And now we're producing virtual SKO deliverables and we're producing sales coaching material. But at that moment, they needed to figure out what to do with their kids. And that was it.
Kyle, that's amazing. So simplistic, but
and it's a coloring book. Who doesn't like a coloring book?
And it also says this is about you and how can we help you, the individual, not just you, the logo, you, the prospect, you, the revenue, but how can we help you as an individual? That's amazing.
I think this part where how to get through the noise is a lot of what we have discussed right now, which is what Kyle was talking about, those interesting different events, like stop selling, start talking, do things that will connect with the issues that they're actually facing versus saying these superficial things of I hope you're safe and healthy and all of that. Reduce spending by corporations. I think we all recognize it. Like there are tons of companies that have reduced spending, but I would say this is one where you've got to ask two questions. Number one, do we sell something that is mission critical for that company today? If so, let's focus on that company. If not, who do we solve a mission critical problem for? Focus on them. And if the answer is none, go back to the product and start changing things up because you're otherwise screwed. Business models. This is interesting. Business models will drive the kind of engagement way forward we're going on. Go by few. Anyone want to tackle that?
I'm gonna leave it to you smart guys on that one.
It seems like a lot of people getting firms to spend, conservative behavior, all of that is there. Creating urgency to get sales deals done. It seems like the predictability of the revenue model is done. Whatever used to work to create urgency is done. Is there anything that will work, or should we just forget urgency and say that this is how it's going to be for a bit? Jayme.
Yeah, so I don't know, like we've been leaning into that a little bit, which is how do you create urgency is by understanding and getting closer to your client and understanding what their challenges are. And the more that you know, it's like the more that you make it less about, hey, what gets this deal done? And or that, you know, ask the simple question, what's different after they buy Lessonly? What's different after they buy Thoughtexchange? What's different after they invest in Roderick's consultant organization? What changes? You know, company X, what happens after? The more that you can get into the mindset of what is different and what we are actually providing, your service is providing, your software is providing, shifts the conversation completely from a very tactical sales manager relationship with an account executive or SDR to like, I've seen our account executives go, you know, from an SDR graduated into an account executive. They're running a 50,000 transaction. I'm like, oh, geez, that's going to be crazy. And yet they're carrying it because they know the impact that happens once they buy our platform and what changes. And they tell that story that then creates the urgency. It's not the best things that you can do. We fall into this trap all the time. It's month end, it's quarter end, and we should give a little bit more discount, or, those are the weakest urgency things that we have. The biggest, strongest urgency is aligning business value of your product to the client that is buying. If you can fundamentally focus that on your coaching, your enablement, your platforms that you leverage, you'll win the game every time, because then you're adding so much value.
Very good. I want to go to the one that I'm seeing right at the bottom, mental health. Let's just touch on that, and then we're going to go back to the other questions I prepared based on what people had asked us to talk about as well. So I want to talk about mental health for a second, because it's obviously a major issue today. People are feeling burnt out, obviously, for a number of reasons. I was listening to a podcast where Kyle, a fellow CMO of yours, Udi from Gong, was talking about how right now in this new virtual environment, it's hard to actually tell how your people are feeling. Like if a person decides to not turn their camera on, you really don't get a feel of like, how is this person doing? Whereas before where there was physical proximity, you could see body language and posture and all of these things. So what advice do you have for leaders that are struggling to figure out, first and foremost, how their people are doing? And secondly, they might be asking the right questions, but asking that they don't know how to ask them the right way to get real feedback from the employees. So what advice do you have for these people?
Well, I'm going to, I've had limited amount of experience here compared to the other people on this call. For me, I had to learn to be overly empathetic. It doesn't come natural to me personally, empathy. I spent a lot of time working on that the first half of the year, and just being very open with them on how I was feeling. Mm-hmm. So it didn't necessarily work when I was just asking them how they're doing, but when I was like, guys, I just had a shitty day. Like, I just feel this is not going well. They seem to people open up when you are being real with them. So for me, that's how I feel. That's not necessarily scalable. I have a team of 33, but if you do one-on-ones, you can, and you're honest about your feelings, people will open up to you. And then from a scalability standpoint, we do pretty employee surveying pretty often. So that helps kind of surface some of the team dynamics, but that's how I handled it personally.
I think what you just said is like perfect. Like Jayme, you gave this experience last time around where like you also in front of your team had like a moment where you were just super honest with them about how you were feeling. And that was kind of the difference maker, where everybody felt so much safer coming to you with their issues. What have you been doing after that? Like, that was a big moment for you guys. What have you done since then to make sure people feel safe, can come to you and have these conversations?
Yeah, I don't know. I love Kyle's comment. It's spot on, which is that's actually the first step that we can actually do as leaders, is be real. Be real with ourselves, be real with our staff. The more that you can actually be real, more likely your staff are going to be real back. And so if you're intentional in sharing, I'm having a shitty day, or here's what I'm struggling with, or here's what's on my mind, it's not weakness. It's just real. Be vulnerable, be real in the conversation. It starts with you as the leader in the organization. You set the tone. I want to work with somebody that's going to be real. Like, I just had this conversation with our head of marketing, and we got into a space, and I've had it with one of my peers. Like, if my staff are not being able to cry or to lean in and tell me that I'm doing a shitty job, I'm not doing a great job. I'm not great all the time. And so when they can create, when I've created that psychological safety, like, Jayme, you didn't recognize me here, and this is how this made me feel. I'm like, ooh, that's good. Like, all right, so now it's the next level of not only did I'm sharing that how I am feeling and where I'm at. The next is then I'm being really intentional. How can I create a space that allows people, like if we're in the game, if you believe in the idea of servant leadership and that the ultimate way to win the game is build trust, then it's a two-way street, and the conversation comes with cheers, it comes with tears, and it's how are you being intentional as a leader to create the space for people to share their emotions, their EQ, as Roderick said at the start. It starts there. If we're doing that with our clients, our employees, imagine what they're being able to accomplish with our clients.
I love that. So it seems like talk to them about your experience. Make sure you're reacting appropriately when they actually say something back to you. And so you're thinking about your reactions. And even though that doesn't seem scalable in a system way, it seems like the best way to actually have a finger on the pulse as to how people are feeling and how to support them. Roderick.
Asad, do you mind if I double tap on that? Because I think the guys have really hit on something that is critical, and also that we don't talk about enough as leaders. And that is, there is credibility in being vulnerable and being human, as both the guys have said. I also want to go back to something I said earlier about modeling behavior. If you show vulnerability and you show humanness and compassion and EQ, they're going to follow you because they're striving to be in your seat or be like you, right? And the third piece is, to your question earlier, about how it's said versus what is said sometimes. I think I've found something that works really good, and I start every one of my business conversations this way, whether it's with the team, mentees, etc. It starts with a single 3-part question. And it starts with, do you want me to listen? Do you want me to coach? Or do you want me to fix? Because it does 2 things. One, it makes the conversation all about that individual. And so they're leaning in, they're tied in now. The second thing is, as leaders, we're natural fixers. That's how we got to where we are most of the time. But newsflash, there's a lot of times it's not a fix that's required. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm trying to do this. How have you seen it done differently? Or sometimes it's, I've tried everything I know. Just tell me what to go and do. So if you step back and say, do you want me to listen? Do you want me to coach? Or do you want me to fix? It completely disarms the conversation, and it changes the course of the conversation.
Can I add on that one? Like, we just get stuck in here for a second. So I've got a leader that I work with. He's been at the company for 7 years. He's running our mid-market sales team. He's had an interesting start to the year. He had hip surgery. He's not even 40 years old, and he's had hip surgery. And we got to a dark place. And those 3 things are exactly what we just did, which was, and I would just say it's a little bit more even on me to get to know your staff so much of when they need the hug, when you need to listen, or when you need to be like sharp. You got this. So it's a little bit of the, those 3 things. And I know him well. And I'm like, okay, so the first part I was like, okay, I'm just going to be sharp. I just got to smack him around a little bit. Like, you got this. Go out there and do this. You're in your head right now. You're doubting yourself. Just go and do it. It wasn't working. So then I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to give him a hug. I love this guy. He's amazing. He's made a massive impact on our business. I'm like, okay, I'm going to hug you, like virtually. This is like, okay, I got you. And I was like, oh shit, that's not working. Oh shit. You know what? I just got to create space and listen. Where is he at? Be super intentional, create the space to listen. And after I listened, I finally heard, and then I could start to learn and lead. Listen, learn, lead. Now I'm like, oh, this is what was in your head? Okay, now I get to go back to like smacking you around a little bit. No way, like this is crazy, go. And then we came up with like, here's the things that you got to work on. And we built a plan for him where he is like, hey, I'm going to come back part-time. And this is what's thing. So now we created an environment that allows him to excel for 4 hours out of the day. And he's like, I'm like, oh my God, he's back. And in 4 hours, it doesn't matter how much time, he's like so far back, engaged. I'm like, whoa, this is it. So it's like, that's on us. Like those 3 things are super powerful. And it's a little bit of the like, let's make sure we're really intentional. That may be different for each individual, but the more you know your staff, the more that you can be like, I gotta sit back and listen, not fix this time.
And that's the thing, Jayme, it's about individualizing.
Yeah.
Right? You can't peanut butter because everyone's different and they're all in a different space and a different place in their journey. So if you step back and ask those questions, that 3-part questions, they will tell you where they are and what they need from you. And
I think I'd challenge Kyle a bit. I think you can scale it. One, we have technology that helps scale it. I think is a little better than a survey that allows people to give a safe space to actually hear. Sure. And 2, it's about your leadership. Your leadership scales because you coach. You then coach your staff and then your staff do it. Like that's the point of us as leaders. It can scale because if we do it right and we're coaching our leaders, than our leaders are actually doing. We don't have to be
But
everywhere.
with young managers, especially on the sales side, you're breaking a habit, which is all throughout your sales career as an IC, you're trained on objection handling. So the minute somebody says something to you, your natural reaction is like to start trying to fix it, start trying to address it. And sometimes you just have to shut up and listen. And that's what the person wants. I actually, like my girlfriend told me once, she's like, can you just shut up for a second? I just want to vent. Like, I don't, like, I know what to do. Shut up. I was like, oh, shit, okay. Kyle, so the LinkedIn released the State of Sales survey recently, and the report said that 90% of respondents felt that sales technology was really important or important to their success. On average, companies are using about 10 different tools, and they were saying that over the next 12 months, everyone plans to add at least 2 more. The problem is, at the same time, 30% of sales organizations feel that they've mastered integration, which means 70% feel they don't and are not getting proper value from everything they've bought, even though sales enablement from a headcount perspective has grown by 2x compared to every other division. This problem still exists. So why is this such a big problem? What do companies need to do to get real value from their solutions? And then especially like from a vendor perspective, what do companies need to do to equip their buyers for success that they might not be doing right now?
I mean, I think it's on the vendors. If your
Right.
customers are not figuring it, like can't figure out how to streamline data, it's on you as a vendor. And if you understand your customer set and you understand the landscape and you're, like we talked about, your future looking, you're going to understand where your integrations need to be built out. Having an open API, all that stuff. So I will always push back on the fact that it's the vendor's fault when a customer can't figure out how to connect their tech stack. Always, unless you're just terrible at buying software, which some of us are. But it's most of the time I'd say it's on the vendor, and that it's not just the integration from the technology standpoint. It's also the education vendor standpoint, right? It's like, how should you be thinking about measuring these things? We recently did a survey for skills development where the majority of sales leaders that we interviewed have no way to measure skills development. Zero. Like they think it's very important, but they just don't have any way to measure it because nobody's speaking to it from a vendor standpoint. So it's on the vendor, in my opinion. You got to, if you're a buyer, you've got to push back hard on the vendor for the integration.
What do you do when you have like a large tech stack and let's say one of the vendors has done a really good job as to showing you how to use their particular tool, but all these others are there as well, and it's just not integrating in a way where for the user it's efficient and effective. What's some advice for companies at that point?
Go back to the starting point. I don't know. I'll probably throw this to the other panelists, but you need to buy off your database of record, in my opinion, which for us it's Salesforce. For a lot of people it's Salesforce, but that would be where I would start.
Yeah. Roderick, do you want to tackle that for a second?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Kyle on one side, and I'm going to add something. And this is to my sales enablement practitioners. And actually, it's a chapter in my upcoming book. So I'm glad you threw this in. Thanks for the tee up. Appreciate it. Just because there are tools and toys out there doesn't mean you have to play with all of them, right? There are a ton of things, and there's always going to be new. It's about figuring out what is the need in your organization. How's this going to help you scale? But most importantly, how do you humanize the technology so that at the end of the day, you're helping people be bigger, faster, and stronger. And it's not just another tool that's in your bag, right? There are, I believe, a certain set of tools that every company needs, regardless of what you're selling, that learning management system, content management system, prospecting and sales reporting, things like sales readiness platforms, all your comms tools, your training and coaching tools, and then your revenue intelligence tools. Now, just within those, there's a bazillion different vendors. So I say crowdsource and find out what's working well. Secondarily, first, what is the outcome like we were talking about earlier? What's the impact that you're looking for? And then reverse engineer that. So reverse engineering means, one, crowdsourcing of your peers. What are you guys using and how are you using it? And if it's a similar use case, right? And then figuring out, things like G2, et cetera, and going out and doing some research. But at the end of the day, what's the outcome? What's the impact? How do I reverse engineer it? And how do I find out if I've got best in class? We actually do a tech stack audit when we're doing a consulting engagement and look at what's in place today, what's available, because it could have been something that was legacy that was left in place, that's been there forever. And then the big question we ask is, when's the last time you actually asked your users, what's the value of this to them? What's the impact? And had them rate it and come back to you. Because we're infamous in sales enablement for giving sales what we think they need. Stop. Go ask questions. They're going to tell you if it works or not.
I love this. The next question is one I was not going to ask till we actually went and spoke to people and said, hey, what do you want us to talk about? And apparently this is still a major concern, and it is onboarding. I was talking to Butch, who's the chairman of Toronto's Revenue Collective chapter, and is the reason Kyle was roped into doing this. He was talking about how the struggle with onboarding is not teaching somebody the why of the organization or the what and how of doing their jobs, but it's more so integrating them into the company culture. And so, Jayme, you guys have been remote for a long time, and you've probably figured this one out a bit. So can you talk about this a bit? Like, how does one, when hiring remotely, make sure that the person integrates effectively into the company culture?
So did you see that I just dropped there too, by the way?
Yeah, where's it going? This is for him.
I was like, wait a second. Oh, no. We don't have fiber in Rosslyn, BC. We're
that's what you get for living out in the middle of Moose. And
you wanted this is what you get.
Yeah, so this is interesting, like culture, remote. So I get it. Like I've been in Crystal Business Objects, SAP, very in office, bullpen, SDR, AEs, AMs, walking across to finance is like, that built out successful high performing teams and get it there. Then I went to NetSuite and it was like hybrid. Actually, we don't really care so much. Let's just go hire the best talent wherever they are. And then I came to Thoughtexchange, was like, oh, there is an office, but no one is actually in the office. Everybody is remote. And it was a powerful switch. So I was like, for me, it was just, and actually to hit on Liz's conversations, she built a team when she's at OpenView, face-to-face team. So when she said, she's like, actually, I'm aware, and now I'm figuring out what I need to do. So I think you have to be aware of where you're at. What is the traditional culture in your organization? Has it been face-to-face? For us, it's like, I don't know, it's easy for me now. It's actually not fair for me to answer this question because I kind of walked into it. We were 100% remote, successfully remote from the start. I was like, oh, this is pretty amazing. And so we did things. So if you're 100% remote, then you think about then what are the things that we actually need to do? And or if you're a hybrid, what are the things you need to do? So you got to assess what's relevant for your own organization. For us being remote, we were like, we invested in technology. We were always Zoom camera, always on, gallery view, give everybody an opportunity to see everybody. It wasn't really acceptable not to be on. Our Slack channels, we had very inclusive, ness of our how we onboarded people to how we connected them. But at the core, I think if you think about culture, it's actually starting to come more and more clear to me now. I have always been a big fan of like a cultural leader. Strategy and culture go hand in hand. How am I creating culture? But I remember being in an interview with the head, who's now the CEO of Blackline, the head of worldwide sales at NetSuite. And he's like, I was like, I'm the best, highest performing leader, and I build amazing cultures. And he challenged me in that interview to be like, what is culture? How do you define it? And I'm like, oh shit, I don't know how to answer that question. I'm getting older and wiser. I'm like, you know what? It's starting to come to me. It's what you do. It's what the things that you do. It's some of the things from value to and I think now it's like at the core of it is how are you being inclusive and allowing people to belong in your organization? That's culture. I want to belong. I want to learn. I want to how is your organization? So while you're remote, and if you believe in that idea of inclusiveness, let's say that idea that inclusive and culture go, or that's the highest, most diverse, inclusive teams are the highest performing. Mm-hmm. If you're there to create a high performance culture, take a look first at your tools, tech stack, your leadership, on how are you helping leaders make sure that diversity is a priority? How are you helping your leaders make sure that inclusiveness is a priority? We recently had a Glassdoor review that said, you know, sharp feedback. We leaned into it. Our CEO at the top of the house leaned into it. We then ran a thought exchange about it. And guess what? We thought we were pretty damn inclusive. And we realized that we weren't as inclusive as we could. So now we get to step up, be vulnerable, step up as a leadership. What can we do to be more inclusive so that everyone feels like they belong? Mm-hmm. Whether you're Black, brown, disabled, LGBTQ, that you're part and feel belong so you can achieve your greatest things in the organization.
And I think
you've got to look at it from that perspective.
Something I've just recently been understood is that on the hiring side of things, it's not easy enough to say you want a diverse workforce. You've got to also, depending on different levels, have different strategies for it. An example is if you're doing it at the executive level, you actually need a different process and sometimes have to be a little bit open-minded to the alignment with the job description. Like if you're valuing diversity of thought, you have to be okay with talking to people that might have 80% of what you're looking for, because when they started off in their careers 30 years ago, 20 years ago, there was some systemic issues because of which they might not be in the positions where the person with 100% of the skill set is sitting today. And it's something that I've recently figured out, and it was quite eye-opening for me. Kyle, my next question's for you. It's about a post you made yesterday, one of many I saw. So you spoke about your predictions for 2021. And there was something fascinating in that, which is that you see CS becoming way more aligned with marketing, and you see sales and marketing becoming one engine. Obviously, that's a fantastic outcome if it happens. In LinkedIn's State of Sales survey, they were talking about how customer satisfaction as well as retention and attrition are getting more importance than individual quotas now, which is exciting to see. It seems like things are lining up well for this. What advice do you have for the leader who wants this to happen, but is one of 4 or 5 and the others haven't leaned into it as yet? What do they need to do to get everyone else on board?
Well, I mean, as a marketer, you need to own a revenue number. Number one. I mean, we talked about that at the beginning, and there has to be consensus as an executive team that the experience is the only thing that makes you relevant as a company. The experience of the prospect, the experience of the customer. So I don't care if it's an account executive, if it's a chat on your website, or if it's a support agent with it on the back end of a contract being signed, or implementation or services or whoever, right? It's the experience. So for me, you know, I happen to think marketing should run all of revenue, but that's a completely different webinar. But, you know, I think that anybody dealing with any type of revenue generation, they should not be siloed. And I don't care how big the company is. And that's why I think a lot of these transitions are going to start to happen, where we are seeing CROs start, or chief digital officers on the consumer side. We are seeing them rise to the top, but you know, I think that that's going to include customer success. If services are reoccurring revenue for your business, they're going to be included, because and you need to have a joint. Well, it's all tip of the spear, right? You need to have a great experience, and that's what's going to make you relevant as a company.
The Winning by Design folks are really progressive about this. For quite some time, we've been talking about you need to be in pods. Like, this is ridiculous that everybody sits and hates each other and doesn't get along. Toronto's, for the first time, I think in a very long time, a CRO from the customer success side of things came about. And it's been wild to see the work that she's doing at her organization. And it is really, really
That's great.
Yeah, their net revenue retention rate's super high. Their new business acquisition rates are really high. I love seeing it. We obviously have more questions for everyone, but we are done with time. Thank you to all 3 of you for doing this. Thank you for everyone for joining us. Today was fun. I think this is the right format for doing things. The last thing I'll say is that the last couple of months have been very hard, and the next couple of months, or the next many months, are going to be tricky. But somebody told me something last week that really connected with me, which was that the skills we're going to learn, the tools we're going to develop through this period, they'll equip us for all other downturns, but on top of that, they'll help us gain maximum momentum during the good times. And so I think in the long term, we'll go back and we'll look at this period with some respect. I hope everyone does well. We're excited for the next one. Thank you, everyone, again. Good luck. Goodbye.